Shabbat shalom, everyone. Good morning. Long before I became a rabbi, long before I tried to develop an attitude that is kind and appreciative of others, many years ago, I used to have a reputation as kind of being a wise ass, pardon my French. It's actually something I've really tried to work on because I thought about it and it was only going to get me into trouble or actually pummeled. I used to be the king of one-liners. I had great comebacks. When I was in college and working at the pet store, we used to sell live crickets. People would buy them to feed them to their lizards or frogs. The large crickets cost 12 cents at the time. The smaller crickets cost 10 cents. And one day, a huge country boy in a cowboy hat wandered over to the cricket bin, and I was having a bad day. And he said, "Why are these crickets 12 cents and these ones 10 cents?" And I pointed to the large crickets and I replied in a very sarcastic tone. I was wrong. I replied in a very sarcastic tone. I said, "Well, these play the piano." He did not like that. My boss did not like that. They had to write the comment on the write-up. It was pretty funny. Years later, we were driving in Los Angeles. My wife, Genevieve, she was in labor with our second child. And that whole drive down to the UCLA hospital was not fun. She was not happy. She was screaming in pain. We arrived at the hospital. I pulled up in the very front because she couldn't walk. I'm freaking out, frantic. I ran around the car and I opened the car door. She is very obviously pregnant. She's being very loud and a little scary. Then this nurse attendant sees that we have pulled up and he approaches us and he asks, "Is she having a baby?" And I, again in a very sarcastic tone, said, "No, she hurt her finger." And my wife started hitting me. The nurse attendant went for a wheelchair. Even though I'm usually quick with the one-liners, there was one time I have to admit I was at a loss for words. We had just gotten married. We'd moved to Los Angeles, and I was about to start rabbinical school. Actually, I had just started rabbinical school. And we went to different synagogues around town, trying to figure out which one fit us the best. We were shul shopping, as they call it, and we went to one place, and this is an enormous synagogue. It's like a castle in the Jewish area of Los Angeles called Pico Robertson. We go to this enormous castle of a synagogue, and we were just casually sitting in the pew as Shachrit was being chanted. Now you should know that before we had kids, when Genevieve and I would show up to a shul, especially in proximity to a Torah service, there was a good chance that two things would happen. The first of which is they would see me and immediately come over and ask if I would lift the Torah, right? That's called Hagbah. They look at me, I guess they think like there's a guy who won't drop the Torah. So I always got asked to do Hagbah. And if I got asked to do Hagbah, additionally, there was a good chance that my lovely wife would be asked to do Glila, to wrap the Torah. Like I said, before we had kids, anytime we walked into a shul, this is what happened. I've lifted so many Torahs in my lifetime. It was great. Now, most of you know that both me and my wife converted. But oftentimes, I'm told I have what's called Jewish passing privilege. Maybe with the beard and the kippah, people just assume that I was born into the tribe. My wife, however, I guess she doesn't have that standard Ashkenazi look. which can lead to situations like I'm about to explain. So we're sitting in the pew, listening to the Chazan chant Shacharit. This older woman approaches us. Lo and behold, she asks if I'll do Hagba, which of course I accept. Then she asks my lovely wife, would you do Glila? And my wife, of course, accepts. But a split second after Genevieve says yes, this woman recoils and says, oh, I'm sorry, are you even Jewish? Which, by the way, this can be an offensive question. It could have been asked with a lot more tact, love, and respect. But my wife is lovely and amazing, so she replies, yes, I am Jewish. And when she says that, the woman then laughs and says, quote, oh, of course you are. What was I thinking? I have a daughter with a nose just like yours. When she said that, my wife, who knows me really well, immediately put her hand on my leg to prevent me from saying something just really terrible in reply. Because in that moment, I was livid. This is important to know, I wasn't just angry because someone had insulted my wife. I was horrified that this woman could make a nose comment in a synagogue. Is this what we've become, nose stereotypes in shul? I was also just completely flabbergasted that this woman would say something like that to strangers, newcomers to her synagogue. And I have often thought about the fact that if I weren't on my way to becoming a rabbi, and if Genevieve and I were just a regular couple wanting to attend a synagogue service, having someone insult you in the pew like that could have turned us off of conservative Judaism, a really organized religion, forever. So after she said that, I braced myself for whatever snarky or sarcastic thing my brain would retort with. But instead, I found myself unable to say anything. And rather, I just sat there in confused silence. In our Parshat for the week, Parshat Shemini, we see another example of silence, but this time it's from Aaron the high priest. The Parsha begins with Aaron and his sons having just finished a week-long party to celebrate their new jobs as the Israelite nation's priests. But on their first day on the job, Nadav and Abihu, again Aaron's sons, they offer to God what the Torah calls an Eish Zarah, or an alien fire. Now, we're not entirely sure what this even means. Perhaps it was an improper type of incense, or they had the correct intent when they offered it. Whatever it was, God was incensed by their actions and sent down fire from the sky that consumed and killed them both on the spot. Some rabbis from our tradition have offered many different ideas, stories, midrashim, as to what could have happened that upset God so much that it led to smiting them. Some sages suggest that they in fact tried to upstage Moses' holiness, while others suggest that Nadav and Abihu were still drunk from their week-long party. Whatever the reason, we'll never know. But we do know that when Aaron finally finds his sons, they are already dead, burnt to a crisp. And the Torah tells us two words, Vayidom Acharon. Aaron was silent. He couldn't or wouldn't say anything. Now, what's unusual about this action, or this non action, really, is that throughout the story of the Torah so far, Aaron has not typically been the silent type. In fact, God appointed Aaron to be the speaker for Moses. And it was Aaron who confronted words with Pharaoh. And it was Aaron who was essentially Moses' press secretary to the Israelites. So the question remains, why is Aaron so quiet now all of a sudden? Well, perhaps he was traumatized, in such shock at the prolific violence dealt to his sons so quickly. Maybe he was giving his brother Moses, or even God himself, the silent treatment. Perhaps Aaron was still internalizing the stress over the incident of the golden calf. Or maybe he was overwhelmed with all the responsibilities of the priesthood. Or perhaps he couldn't handle being the voice of God's literal chosen prophet. Wherever it was, whatever it was, Vayidom Acharon, Aaron was silent, and in that moment he couldn't find the words. Friends, believe it or not, Jewish tradition makes space for silence, and sometimes we even encourage it. The rabbis suggest that it is much better to remain silent, especially if what we were about to say could have the potential to harm or upset someone. In fact, Pirkei Avot, very famous example, says, quote, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, all the days I have grown up among the wise, and I have found nothing better than silence. Jewish tradition gives us the permission to be silent when we're traumatized, when we're scared, when we're in awe, or perhaps when we're in love. And I think that it's okay to have the permission to be silent. Since that day, I have oftentimes thought about my silence in the synagogue, my lack of response to that woman. I thought about what I could have said, and I'm glad that I did not say it. I have since praised God, my wife, and even myself for not saying anything back. Perhaps God did not give me the words then so that I could have the words now, instead to teach all of you. Maybe the whole incident was a lesson. Maybe we're all supposed to learn that what we say to each other is so important, but what we don't say can be even more valuable. Silence is golden. Shabbat Shalom.